Hello, welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today our guest is Gangaji. Hi, Gangaji.
Hi.
And I'm just remembering I first heard about you several years ago. There's a friend of mine called Tosho. He's dead now. He died of cancer several years ago. And he told me something very significant happened just in a meeting with you. It wasn't even at a meeting. It was just meeting you. And what happened was that he'd heard about you, and he was going to a satsang you were holding in Maui, Hawaii, and it was pouring with rain. And he was a little confused. He wasn't sure where to go, and he stopped this car to ask directions, and the window wound down. Actually, it was probably electric, wasn't it? He probably pushed a button, and it was you. And he was so taken aback, he just started laughing in the rain. And literally, something changed in his life, and he was never the same again. It's just, and I think the words he used were something like, the background became the foreground, and the foreground became the background. And so, are you aware you have a catalytic function somehow? Is that?
Well, it's certainly nothing I do, so I'm not aware of it in sense of a power and I'm doing something. But I did have a similar experience with my teacher when he opened the door when I first met him in Hardwar, and he said, "Welcome, come in." And there was just this hugeness and this presence. I did know about him, and I knew I was going to meet what hopefully was my real final teacher. But I saw him, and there was such a welcome in his eyes that I just started laughing, and I recognized this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And when I would question him about that, he said, well, that's the mystery. You are supposed to be here, and neither one of us is in charge of that. And so it's some kind of synchronistic moment of coming together. When you tell that story, I can remember that because it's rare that somebody starts to ask you for directions and then just burst wide open.
Right.
So I would say it was coming from him. It was a thrilling meeting. It went back and forth.
Yeah. It was interesting because I kind of lost contact with him. I used to see him socially, and then he had cancer and was very sick, obviously dying, and he was in a hospice. And apparently, I didn't visit him. I wasn't so close to him then. But what happened in the hospice was that he, obviously, you know you're going to die. Other people know they're going to die. The nurses know you're going to die. And he kept saying to the other guys there, "Isn't this exciting? We're all going to die. I wonder what happens next." And I just thought, that touched me. I just thought that was brilliant.
Beautiful. What an attitude.
Yeah.
It's curiosity. You know, it's the willingness to not know and to be conscious in that. It's a death that's like that is a gift to everybody who's present. And really, as you were telling me about him, it seems like his life was like that. This openness then. You mentioned that the background shifted to the foreground, and the way I hear that is that what we're usually protecting is then in front of the protection, and we can be who we are. And we are, even just as human beings, naturally curious creatures. And we build up places we aren't supposed to go or aren't supposed to look into, and we suffer from that. And so this willingness to look into death, well, that's a willingness for the ultimate curiosity and openness.
In a way, I guess it is, I haven't thought about this myself a lot, but I guess that's, you don't really know. People say, well, different religions say different things happen, and there could be past lives, there could be future lives, but we don't really know, do we?
It sounds like those are mostly comfort stories to me, as a way of not having to face death. So I find it really useful to ask people, at least temporarily, to put all of those stories aside and to assume that in that moment of death, everything you think you are is no longer existing. It's over, it's finished. So you as you think you are, you as you experience yourself, perceptions and your memories, your history, your attainments, it's finished. And in that, then, there's a possibility of meeting oneself as nothing, as no thing. And that's freedom. really, because everything that we are burdened by is some kind of attachment to who we are. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm enlightened, I'm unenlightened, I'm famous, I'm not famous, I made it, I haven't made it. In death, it's all over. You're nothing. And that's free. So that was that moment for Tasha, I think, when the window rolled down. It's like there was just freedom. There's nothing happening. And that becomes the foreground of the life.
So let's just spin back a little bit to when you were young. I know you had certain experiences that really impacted you at the time, were important for you. Can we just talk about some of the significant ones?
Well, most of them were not very pleasant experiences, and it's only really in retrospect that I can see that they were important in forming some deep spiritual search for me. My parents were both alcoholic, and so I was basically taken care of but neglected as a child, and maybe hypersensitive, and I started having very weird experiences when I was about 6, where my body would start to disappear. But it was not blissful disappearance.
Yes.
It was horrific. I was becoming non-existent. Things would get very big, and then they would get small, and then I would disappear. And I ran to my mother, and she had no idea what I was talking about. And so I ended up going to a psychiatrist, 6 years old, and he showed me some ink blots and gave me some phenobarbital. So every time this started to happen to me, I would take a phenobarbital. And I would say it was a nervous disorder. It was something, it wasn't Satori or enlightenment coming. It was deep stress from a little hypersensitive child. And so I took these barbiturates, a little particle of a barbiturate, to calm myself down. And it wasn't until I was 18, 19 or 20, and I first began to meditate, that I decided no more of that. Let's see what this is. And sure enough, in the first long meditation I ever did, say an hour meditation, it started to happen again. And rather than escape it with medication or just jumping up and getting a glass of water, I just sat with it. And it was actually beautiful then. It was peaceful.
But it takes courage to sit with it, doesn't it?
It took courage for me, because I didn't have any support to sit for it. It was a pathology, and so it needed to be fixed or healed. And I can't even say why at that moment there was a decision. Well, I didn't like the fact of having to take a little pill when something started happening. It wasn't happening that often, 2 or 3 times a year, but it was just a revelation to me that actually I had the experience that, now I can see, I had the experience that if you're willing to just open to what is arising, just to suspend judgment for a moment, or evaluation, this should be happening or shouldn't be happening, and just be with it fully and completely, then it's beautiful. And I think this is true of people dying, and I think it's true of people who have fear arising in their lives, and it was certainly true for me in this. And it did shift my life. It didn't make me happy. There were many other things that had to occur, but it gave me some inner courage to actually live life with a little more direct curiosity and adventure.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're triggering memories for me, because I had similar experiences when I was a teenager. I felt I had no body, and I'd be walking along the street and I felt I was just going to fall down because there was nothing to support me. And I'd forgotten that actually I got barbiturates as well from the doctor, and when I took them, it relaxed me. And then I think I was still living at home then, and my mother hid the bottle, and there was never a discussion about why I had them. And that support structure went. I went to get some more from the doctor, but it's that. And then what I discovered several years later was very interesting, and it took me a long time to integrate this, insofar as what that experience was in a way a very, very deep experience, but it was my fear of the experience. That was the problem. It wasn't the experience. And like you, in meditation and later in my experience in life, it would come up frequently. It frequently still does, but it doesn't frighten me anymore.